now our favorite part, which is the Q&A. And we're actually going to be going back and forth between Irvine and here in Albany, because Adam Jackson, of course, is still with us to answer any specific questions related to class and class balance that players may have. But I know one question that, as we queue up questions specifically from our side and have my live feed right here, will attempt to not butcher names. Maybe I will. I will. Spoilers. But one question that we do have is, how have the team's thoughts changed in regards to balance since Diablo 4's release? This is a question for Mr. Adam Jackson in Irvine. If you could help us with that answer.
Yeah, let me think. It's a deep question, but I think, okay. So, I guess we'll start with, because there's like a long history of balance, right? I think there's actually a very good story, and we could start even before launch and going into launch and how we thought about things. But I think we'll start with like season 1 and the transition from kind of the launch version of the game into our first season, right? Obviously, when we launched the game, we had some pretty benign ideals, I think, of, hey, we want all the classes to be within a certain power range of each other, and everything should be viable for everyone, and basically everything feels good, and there's a lot of different ways to play, right? And then one of the issues that we ran into this season 1 that I think is interesting to talk about is we realized that in our quest to make items and item stats really fun and powerful and interesting, we had over budgeted on quite a few of them. And I think just in the interest of time, I'll pick on cooldown reduction. It's a very scary stat to me and the team. So we realized in the launch version game, the cooldown reduction was too high, right? And so players are basically able to solve cooldown reduction, using that with air quotes, and get to a point where they had very low, if any, cooldowns on a lot of their skills. And this was true for many stats, not just cooldown reduction. But one of the problems that we knew was going to come up that was a kind of future us problem, or really almost immediately us problem, is that if we let players solve these things, whether it's defensive stats, cooldown reduction, resource, whatever it may be, and we let them solve it only in gear, then we're going to get to a state where we can't give exciting things to you anymore that you're going to be really happy about and that will feel impactful, because you just got it all in gear, right? And while gear does need to be cool and interesting, if you completely solve these things, I can't give you a legendary power, or I can't give you something late game that really buffs and changes your build in a meaningful way if you got it from just one source. And so then we launched season 1, and we're like, okay, we're going to kind of eat our vegetables here, and we're going to preserve the long-term health of the game, but we're going to do these very necessary nerfs, and there are quite a few, right? And even at the time we did this, we knew, we tried to mix in a bunch of buffs and, try and make it feel good, but we just didn't hit the mark, right? We kind of failed in that endeavor. We did, do the necessary things to bring the game in a long-term healthy state, but it came at the cost of player fun and player sentiment. And so you went from the beginning preseason to season 1, and the game overall just got quite a bit less fun because you were just less powerful and you weren't compensated enough from the player point of view. And so we kind of learned a lesson there of like, we need to be a little bit more thoughtful and careful of when we roll out these things and how we roll them out, and then also how we communicate it, right? Because we didn't really tell people the intricacies of these problems. We just came out with a patch and let you figure it out, and that didn't go too well, right? So then in season 2 came around, and we did a big combat math update to the game. We were kind of a little worried because we had to kind of thread this needle of, we also were nerfing player power because we changed a lot of multiplicative synergies to be additive, but we wanted to do it in a way where you felt more powerful and it felt more fun and fair. So we had to do a lot of more work on the monster side and balance monsters to the new expected player power when, vulnerable is not always multiplicative and all these other crazy things going on. And I think we threaded that needle really well. A little bit to my surprise, I'll be honest. I was a little scared going into it because it's just such a big update, right? And then we also decided during season 2, when it came to balance, that instead of trying to, nerf and whack-a-mole things that are really strong and immediately take them away, because it's not supposed to be that way, we just kind of let it ride. And so that's why you saw things like, Ball Lightning, Hoda Barb, the Druid, Poison Druid, Rogue combo, like many classes had just something that was kind of crazy. And we just let it go. But even now, towards the end of season 2, we're seeing that, some people are starting to be a little upset, like, hey, these same builds are just killing everything. And if I want to do the really hard content, I have to be one of these things because that's the only thing that works. And obviously, we don't want that to be the future of the game forever. And so now we're trying to come up with a more balanced approach of how we see these things. And that's why, again, I was saying kind of in my presentation, we're thinking a lot of, how often do we update actually really matters, I think, from your point of view as a player. because that determines how long you are safe to do something that feels crazy and awesome and powerful. But then also how we update the game matters as well, of like, hey, are we okay with, one or two things being really strong for a while, or what is the range that something can be too strong before we consider it a problem? That's another subject that maybe I like to go into in the future, or more in depth in the future. But I think that kind of answers the question. It's already a little long-winded, so I'll leave it there.
All good. No, I appreciate it, Adam. And so we're going to go through some additional questions. I might be going back to Adam, but I know one question that we at least have gotten regarding Season 3 is, this is from Ice Vixen. I'm attempting. What about group play in vaults? How does that specifically work? Because obviously there's like the warding buff and everything. How do rewards kind of associate with that?
Right. So you are able to group up and play through a vault. And yeah, it behaves pretty much like any other Nightmare dungeon. And so, there are instances where if you leave the dungeon, you will lose the buff. So we're trying to avoid some cases where players might try to cheat their way to the end.
Yeah.
But overall, we're trying to be as supportive as possible for group play.
Awesome. Makes sense. And then I know this is a question back for Adam, a popular question regarding minion builds and plans for minion builds. I know this one has been brought up in chat quite often. What are the plans for like maybe Necromancer or Druid minion builds specifically?
Yeah. I definitely don't get asked this all the time. So let me think. So we know the feedback that people want minion builds to be kind of more impactful, and these are now I'm kind of going into my opinion, but I think a lot of that feedback comes from a combination of, they don't feel necessarily maybe as powerful as other builds, which we can and we do. And if you've noticed in our past patches, we've consistently been number buffing minion builds, and even this patch does have some number buffs in that realm. But I think a more complicated, difficult problem to solve is kind of the relationship between the player and the minion, and making the minions feel really cool and awesome, and your investment into them really pay off in a way that is kind of more visceral. That is a harder problem to solve that requires it's in my mind, and I'm not promising anything, but these are things like rethinking of how the Book of the Dead upgrades work, and that relationship between sacrificing and minion upgrades, and really trying to make them do more visually, I think, cool and awesome things, and maybe more reacting to you, and so you feel like they're doing a lot more on their own a little bit. That's kind of the direction that we think. We don't have anything to announce right now as far as that. And Druid Companions, I think, are kind of in a similar vein, even though they don't have quite the same support in fantasy that Necromancer does, because they don't have a Book of the Dead, for example. But I think players really just want this visceral feeling like I've got my gain with me, and we're all going and messing with stuff. So we're doing number buffs now. It is a thing that we are looking at. I don't have any promises of when, because again, this is something that I think is a little more difficult to tackle, and we have other things that we're tackling that are a little more difficult coming in the near future. But it is something that we know of and that will definitely be coming. I just don't know when.
Awesome, I appreciate it. A question related to Uber uniques on Uber vaults. Is that something that players can find there, or like what can they find in that specifically?
So Uber uniques are still the domain of Duriel at this point. That's going to be your best shot for getting Uber uniques. But we still wanted to make the Uber vault rewarding. And so for the Seneschal construct, we've actually created several unique tuning stones, which really we haven't given away too much information about. But defeating Uber Malphus is going to be the only way to earn those.
Awesome. Yeah. So players will be able to get really, really powerful, unique tuning stones specifically from those. And I will spoil it a little bit. We did technically have PC Gamer did a good interview with Sean, and I know it was kind of revealed specifically in one of the shots there. So if people want a sneak peek of what one does, there is an opportunity to actually check it out there. So people can actually see it there. Another question back for Adam. This is another big question within chat. Oh, by the way, Beefcake Monster asked that last question. I forgot names, but this one is actually asked by a lot of people, so just many names specifically.
Sure.
Snapshotting. Snapshotting is something that kind of appeared, especially as players were going through like Abattoir of Zir. Do we have any plans regarding snapshotting, what we might do for that?
Yeah, we do have things coming. I don't have anything to announce today. It won't be at the beginning of Season 3, but we do have fixes coming for snapshotting. We're aware of the problem. It came on a little hot at the end of Season 2, but yeah, we've talked about it. We've seen it. We kind of know the intricacies of it, and we'll be taking a look at it in the near future.
Awesome, I appreciate it. A question that I've also seen a few times in chat about Zoltan Kuhl, funny enough, do we like encounter Zoltan Kuhl in this?
Do not encounter him. He is still dead, no digging up his head this time, but you will hear his voice. We have several lore books that drop throughout the vaults, and generally his presence, and Ayujan speaks of him quite often.
Of course, we have to hear Zoltan Kuhl and his wonderful voice of talking down to everyone. So that makes perfect sense. I know a question regarding the vault specifically. Is that an area that players can actually maybe potentially level up Paragon glyphs, or is that still something that is tied to Nightmare dungeons?
So the Nightmare versions of Vault should work the same way as Nightmare dungeons in that respect.
Awesome.
And you should be able to level up your glyphs there too.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that a lot of people were hearing about the Nightmare vaults and they're going like, well, does that serve also the same, like, can I do almost like get both objectives in one type of thing, which you now can. And that was from Galley055 who asked that question specifically. And then I know a question we have from UN Tanks Up. Bad. Terrible, Adam. How many times can we do the gauntlet in a week?
So we have not restricted players' access to the gauntlet. I think it's the type of content we want people to try and master. And in order to be able to do that, you've got to be able to practice and you've got to be able to improve. And so really you can play it as much or as little as you want. Which is a change, again, from something like a Nightmare Dungeon where you need a sigil. The only requirement right now is that you are World Tier 4 and that you think you're ready.
Yeah. So again, you can jump into these specifically before, gauntlets specifically before hitting level 100. It's usually preferred to go in at level 100, but you can try tackling it a little bit earlier if you want. And you can do it as many times as you want, which is really cool. So I'm excited to see how players optimize because, of course, they change every single week and they get to kind of like learn and they get to kind of maybe modify based on how many people are within their party, which is really, really cool. A question that we also have been getting regarding some of the I lost my question now. I'm so bad at this. The itemization updates that we have talked about in the past. A lot of people are asking like, hey, is that still on track for Season 4? This one was specifically from Fermel. Yes, that is still on track for Season 4. We have a really massive itemization update coming specifically for that season. And we'll have more news to share as we get closer to Season 4. But for right now, we don't have news to share with the community for Season 3 regarding that. But it will be pretty significant, and we'll be talking about that more in a future stream here coming down the line. And then, let's see, any updates regarding like some of the group finders or social features? I know that is also another big question that a lot of players have been asking over the last, couple of months, specifically about, hey, are we making any changes and everything towards that? And really, this is something that we addressed at BlizzCon as well. I think Tiffany answered this one where it is something that we're looking into, and the team is obviously seeing the feedback, and it's something that we're planning on working and making better through the lifetime of Diablo 4. So players can expect to see better and more optimizations towards the social features and the friend finder specifically from that end. Let's see. Do we get more sources of Uber uniques for this specific season? Really, the best way of grabbing Uber uniques is through the boss ladder for sure, through Uber Duriel. And there are more, you can, of course, find Uber uniques anytime throughout the game. It's just there are higher chances through Uber Duriel, and that is still the same specifically for this season. And then, of course, now more opportunities to go into that fight now, since we've like amped up a lot of the drops specifically around like Living Steel from season 2 to the Beast and Ice summoning items now with season 3. So players will actually be able to kind of jump into Uber Duriel specifically from that end. Let's see. I know we get a lot of questions about field of view. From players asking like, hey, is there any update of like, are you guys planning on actually increasing the field of view? Right now, we don't have any plans towards that. It's just something that we've been hearing a lot from players. There's a lot of work that, of course, has to go into something like that. But whenever we do have an update, we'll make sure to actually provide that specifically on that end. Codex updates is another big thing because people have been asking about the codex updates. I'm just like kind of shotgunning. I'm seeing like words appear in chat. I'm like, oh yeah, that thing. That is something that we talked about before, and that work is currently underway, and that will also be part of a future season. And it is a massive update. It's something that we had talked about beforehand on previous streams, which was kind of helping out with inventory, making sure those specific aspects were like pulled out of inventory and kind of stored within the character or cataloged within the character. So we will have more info on when that actually ends up hitting soon. But there's a ton of things that are coming to D4 to help address a lot of some of this community feedback specifically on that end. And then question regarding Gauntlet.
Okay.
This is from RM Dragonheart. Will you be able to inspect the top players in Gauntlet and see what builds they're potentially using?
So you will be able to inspect the top players from Gauntlet. There'll be a link from the leaderboard to a player's profile. And you'll be able to see what they're playing currently. But we do not save a snapshot right now of what they played at that moment.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to see kind of like, top builds and stuff like that, you have the opportunity to, but it does, if they happen to change their build overnight or something like that, it's going to grab whatever that existing build is specifically from that end. And then I know we've gotten, or this was a question from Max, not TV, regarding Malthus. Do we have any plans of Malthus becoming maybe potentially an endgame boss outside of the season? Or are we planning on maybe, introducing it in like a boss ladder in the future?
Right. So every season, much as Adam described for Power, we take a look at those elements that we really liked from a previous season to see if we can bring them forward. Certainly people on the team like fighting Malthus. Hopefully y'all enjoy fighting Malthus too. If you like fighting him enough, then perhaps in the future, we could bring him over to the boss ladder.
Yeah,
but,
just like Farshawn.
Yeah, but we're no commitments to that quite yet.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I know we went through some questions here, and we're a little over beyond. We were aiming for 90 minutes. We're a little beyond. It's totally fine though. Really appreciate. Yeah, a lot of stuff in season 3. Really appreciate everyone providing questions. And if you have additional questions, of course, make sure to ask them over social media, Reddit, forums. We're always checking those out, and of course, we'll try to address them in either future streams or immediately if we can after the stream. Again, patch notes for season 3 and the new 1.3 patch are going to be hitting tomorrow. So make sure to check Diablo4.com specifically for those patch notes. It's a big one. Always a big patch notes when you start off a new season specifically. And we have a lot of other activities that are going on within the Diablo universe. Diablo 3 started their new season just a couple weeks ago. D2, repping D2 today. There we go, D2R. D2, I know we've gotten a lot of questions about when the next ladder will be. We'll have more news on that in February. We don't expect a ladder reset to happen until February, but we'll give you a specific date as we get closer to February. Of course, DI has a ton of new updates as well. They had a big update before the holiday regarding familiars being added to the game, and they've been expanding on that. So there's a ton of stuff coming to the Diablo universe. D4, even earlier this month, we talked about how we will have ray tracing and a lot of those features coming into Diablo 4 here really soon. So players should expect to see that within a future update really soon. So I'm super excited for those items. But lots of stuff. within the Diablo universe, and of course, season 3 hitting on January 23rd. I just want to thank Madeline, Dan, Adam Jackson from Irvine. I'm looking forward to flying back and saying hi again, Adam. But I want to thank you guys for of course joining us on this special developer update live stream for season 3.